Jim Carroll's just entering the building, so I guess we can start. I'm Tom Jacobs and have the pleasure of chairing the Bennington Select Board. This is Monday, March 25th, 2019. We're convened here at the Bennington Fire Facility, and as we do, I would like to have my colleagues introduce themselves. Maybe we can start with our town manager.
I'm Stuart Hurd, the town manager.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm Jean Connor.
Carson Thurber.
I am the late Jim Carroll.
Good evening, I'm Donald Campbell.
Hello, I'm Jeannie Jenkins.
Good evening, Chad Gordon.
Thank you very much, one and all. We start all of our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. If Donald, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Donald. Thank you. We do have a consent agenda to consider. The minutes of the March 11th, 2019 meeting have been circulated. It includes the warrants. I will sign the same upon the board's motion and approval of the consent agenda. Could I have a motion?
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
A discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
That's 7 in favor and no opposition. And as we always do, we start the meeting with matters of public comment. These are matters that are not already on the warrant agenda. So if I don't recognize you, that means you're probably going to get an opportunity to speak when we do deal with that item on the agenda. We do have James Salerno and Peter Odinera from the Manufacturing Forum. Hi, Peter. Hello. And Jim.
While Peter is handing out the supporting documentation, I suppose I should just take a second to get some of the rest of the folks in the room acquainted with the program that we're working on. About a year ago, Hale Mountain Research, my company, K&E Plastics, Mac Molding, Command Composites, who am I forgetting? NSK and several other local manufacturers all started collaborating on a program that we could use to help train our workforces. We started working with the CDC on this program, the Career Development Center, and we've really had a lot of good luck training a lot of our incumbent employees, and now we're working on the next part of the program, which is to roll the training program out to the general public, townspeople, people in the surrounding areas, hopefully to address some of the workforce and skills issues that we've been seeing at our individual companies. The key piece of this is promoting a public forum that's going to be here at the firehouse April 3rd from 4 to 6 p.m. And I'll let Peter go ahead and take over and speak more to that.
Okay, and I did pass out the agenda to the select board members, so if at any point in time you have questions, let me know. The primary purpose, as James said, will be to highlight the training programs and pathways that we have in place to support a robust manufacturing economy. Highly profiled will be the training that's started about 6 months ago at the Career Development Center, but also attending the forum will be a representative from Hudson Valley Community College, as well as the Community College of Vermont. In the other document that I handed out, this came from the recent impact report from the Vermont Manufacturing Extension Center, and the two things that I highlighted there is, one, for every $1 in manufacturing goods generates an estimated $1.89 worth of additional economic activity, the highest of any economic sector. And then the other data point is each manufacturing job supports an additional 4 jobs elsewhere. So the multiplier effect from having a robust manufacturing economy is real. And I think that if we all come together as a community and the surrounding towns and support the companies that are looking to employ Vermonters and Southern Vermonters, people from Hoosick Falls and the Berkshires. In my view, we can only get ahead as a community.
Great. This is pretty special. It's all about workforce. We talk about economic development, but it starts at home. It starts right in your workforce. It's also nice to see, James, you're going to be considering the downtown as part of your operation. We're looking forward to seeing that in operation. And you're probably a real example of what you can do when you have an idea and you also have the ability to make an impression on the industry and also bring employees along with you. We're hoping great success for that. I think that's the board's feeling across the spectrum. It's just our community has really a wealth of opportunities already. Thanks for the industries and also for the educational environment that many of the students are involved in. I think you can probably testify even tonight of the opportunities available to folks out of high school, college, or second opportunities. There are opportunities right now, and they pay quite well. But you've got to educate, and you've got to be informed, and you've got to be interested. I think this forum is just another way of bringing that into focus. Anything this board can do to get the word out, we're right here with you. Any other comments, folks?
I would be interested to know who you think who is this most geared towards? What are the people you're most trying to get to come to this event?
In a perfect world, our target audience would be the high school folks, both men and women. The lift and brunt's been taken out of manufacturing a long time ago. And even though men still have the majority of manufacturing jobs, there's no reason young women can't enjoy have a similar career. Having said that, I know there's a couple people that I've interfaced with who work at the various different grocery stores. Who, they're either cashing me out or bagging groceries, and I'm like, hey, did you know about this coming up? So it's really about networking. In a small town, I think we lack the size and scale to have that perfect demographic. So you have to really reach out wherever you can.
Great, thank you.
Great.
I just want to say I'm really happy. I think this is really excellent that manufacturers are working together because it builds scale. And I think we do have a strong manufacturing base here, and this is really important. So I'm looking forward to the forum.
My one final comment is Mike from Cat TV made the rounds of all manufacturers about a week or so ago. And he sent around a 8-minute video that I would say is fantastic. Mike did a great job. I think it highlights really the cutting edge of our manufacturing community. I think it's not quite ready for prime time, but should be in a couple of days, and I'd encourage you all to take a look at that because that was really well done.
Great.
Can I get this in a digital format? I can share it at the high school with our senior seminar. That way we can get it to most of our graduating seniors.
Can I send that to you, Dan?
Possible?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
I just have a quick question. How far is your reach? How many, are you going across borders? Are you going up to Manchester? What's your?
In terms of our collaborative partners? Or
No, inviting people. letting
It's
people know.
primarily throughout the county.
County.
But we are trying to go across borders to Hoosick Falls, Berkshires, Windham County. The nice part about this is these are sustainable careers. So if somebody gets into this workforce development pipeline and gets an interview and one day a job at one of these companies that are participating in this initiative, it stands to reason that they would be, looking to shorten their commute eventually one day too. So I think it's very apt that you ask how far is our reach on this. We're trying to make it as far as possible.
And I think we have to, because if you look at the profile of the 5 companies that are going to be presenting, collectively we have a workforce of approximately 1,000 people.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Thanks, guys. Wish you luck.
Thank you.
Help.
Thanks. Hope to see you all there.
Right. Thanks. Okay. We also have Bob Blanke. Bob Blanke. Bob, you're there. Hi, Bob.
My name is Bob Blackie. I live at 1003 East Road, and I've lived there since 1964. The young lady to my left is my significant other, Terry Beach, and she lives there with me. I have a serious hearing difficulty, and she's going to be my interpreter should I get stuck.
Go for it, Bob.
On March 4th, we were home. I was in my dining room at the computer. Terry was in the living room. She yelled at me that someone was banging on the front door and that she yelled to them to go around back. I got up from the computer and I started to go toward the door because I wanted to put the back light on, when all of a sudden the door flew open and this guy comes bursting in. He looked to me like a homeless guy, kind of scary, and he was out of control. He was yelling, "We're all gonna die, we're all gonna die. Did you see it on Facebook? My sister's in a pajama party," making no sense. So I didn't want him to get into the house to have access to the house, so I kind of got up close to him, and he grabbed me, and he said, "We're gonna die, we're gonna die." And at that time, I said to him, "Hey, you left the storm door open." And when he turned around to go to the storm door, I pushed him out the door, slammed the door, and locked it. He spun around, he started banging on the door, grabbing the door handle, trying to get back in the house, still rambling about gonna die. And at one point, he said, they're after my parents, they're gonna kill my parents. And I thought at that point that I recognized him as someone from up the road, and I said, "The Watsons, right?" And he said, "Yeah, Chuck Watson, that's my family, they're gonna kill me, they're gonna kill me." So I said, "Well, you gotta get home, go home, take care of them." And he kept, no, you don't understand. So anyway, he finally turned and ran out the door. Terry, in the meantime, had picked up the phone and was right behind me, so I'm gonna call 911. And I said, "No, hold it, let me call the PD." So I took the phone, I called the police department. Dispatcher answered. I gave her my name, I gave her my address, and I told her exactly what happened with the guy bursting into my house. She told me all the officers are tied up. Now, when you make an emergency call to the police department,
Before you go, what time was this? What time was that?
7 o'clock,
In the morning or in the evening?
7 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah, 7 o'clock. So just as a sidelight, when you have an emergency and you call the police department for help and they tell you they're all tied up, the first thing that goes through your mind is, I got to handle this myself. And every way I thought possible of handling the situation myself involved violence. The first thing I thought is, I'm going to go get my gun. Then I calmed down a little bit and said, no, that's not a good idea. So anyway, she says, I said to her, "Listen, this is an emergency. This guy is out of control. This is serious." She said, "Well, do you want an officer to come to your house?" I said, "Of course I do." She said, "Well, we'll send one when there's available or something." That was the end of the conversation. 55 minutes later, no police officer came, and the guy's back at my door. banging on the back door, trying to get in the house, still carrying on about we're all gonna die, the people across the street, making no sense at all. So I kept yelling at him to leave and go home and this and that. And I spun around and Terry was behind me with the phone and she said, I called 911. Well, the guy kept carrying on and Terry started crying. So I took the phone and I spoke to the lady from 911, the dispatcher. Terry had given her some information, so she asked some more from me, and then she plugged into the Bennington PD. So now I had the dispatcher from 911 and the dispatcher from the police department. And I said, ladies, you do not seem to understand the seriousness of this offense here, what's going on. And I said, this is the second time I called about the same thing. I said, now if he comes back a third time, I will shoot him. And at that point, the Bennington dispatcher said, there's an officer on the way. Now, the dispatcher that I talked to the second time was not the dispatcher I talked to the first time. It was a different lady. So an officer's on the way. That was approximately 8 o'clock. The officer never showed up to my house until 8:15. So he comes in and he says, and I told the dispatcher when I had called that I thought I recognized the person as being from the Watson house. So Sergeant Harrington came in and told me that a Bennington police officer and a state trooper had the guy at the residence and that he was going to go there and check and see what was going on. So he said, I'll let you know. And I said, well, you let me know tonight because I'm not going to bed till I hear from you. Oh, he must have been gone about 20 minutes and he came back and he said, told me the guy's name and said the guy was he was out of control and his parent says he had a mental health condition and he was in some kind of paranoid situation or something, and that they agreed to keep him there at night and to give him the meds that he was supposed to take. I really didn't think that that was the right solution, but that wasn't my judgment. I don't think a police officer is qualified to make an assessment on mental health people. And I think that that officer, by allowing that guy to stay there, put himself at risk. Because if that guy would have come out that night and burned the house down or something, he would have been liable. I think what should have happened is he should have been taken to the emergency room and evaluated by some mental health people. And then if they felt it was safe to let him be, that would be a different story. Anyway, so I told the police officer, I'm not happy with this. I'm going to go see the chief tomorrow. So the next day, I went down to the police station, 8:30 in the morning. She said the dispatcher told me the chief was not in. She didn't know what his schedule was for that day, and she had no idea if he was even coming in. So I said I'd come back. I went back at 2:30 in the afternoon, told him I wanted to speak to the chief. She went in the back, she came out, and she said, Chief's tied up for the rest of the day, and he can't see you. But if you give me your phone number, he'll call you. I left my phone number. I waited 48 hours. I never got a call. So on the 7th, I went down and talked to Stu, the town manager, explained the situation to him. He said he would have the chief get in touch with me. By the time I got home, there was a message on my phone that the chief had called. So I called him back, and I said, I want to meet with you about this situation. But when I met with Stu said he was going to set up a meeting, and I said, I'm not meeting alone with him. I said, I want you with me. Be there. And Stu agreed. So I told that to the chief, and he set up a meeting for the next day at 11 o'clock. I went down, Stu was there with the chief, and to start off with, I said, well, you know, you guys have a basic idea what happened. I said, are you satisfied with the way things were handled? And they both said yes. So they both agreed that taking an hour and 15 minutes to respond to an emergency call is acceptable. So I started asking questions about things to the chief. I asked him, I said, how many officers do you have working that night? He said, 3, 2 patrolmen and a supervisor. Now, Bennington's got 38 square miles and 15,000 people. You think you think 2 officers and a supervisor can provide adequate protection to them, to the people? So I asked him, well, where were those officers when I made the call that they were tied up? He said, 2 were at down at Walmart looking for a missing lady, and the supervisor was at the town meeting. And I said, what happened to the 2 officers after Walmart? He said they went to the town meeting. So I said, well, why was it necessary when you only had 3 people on duty to have them all at the town meeting? And he said that was because they had gotten some information that there might be a disturbance or a protest or something at the town meeting. So if you look at I got 3 officers working tonight, and I got information that there's going to be trouble at the town meeting. Why wouldn't I call in 2 off-duty officers to take care of the town meeting so that the other officers could take care of the calls that came in?
You know, that was night before actual town meeting. That was the meeting in the evening. I think we were here. And there was a lineup of police officers. But the essence of it is that, you know, this is a matter that really should be addressed with the chief and the town manager to come up with a resolution. It's unfortunate that you have to be here sharing this concern, because it would be a concern that I might share with you, but it probably can best be addressed by an appropriate response by the town manager and the police chief. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, listen. If you take some time to do some research, you're going to find out that that policy that says they need to have a minimum of 3 officers on a shift, that's the same policy that was in effect in the 1990s, over 25 years ago.
Yeah, when we were here, a number of officers left.
Now,
Because-
another thing is, I asked the chief,
Yeah.
after I made the initial call, what did the dispatcher do with the information? And he didn't know. Now,
Okay.
I can't believe that there's not a directive or something that tells people how to do their job, so that if somebody called in, and he said he would look into it, he said they usually tell a supervisor. I said, usually? I mean, don't you follow the same procedure every time you get a call? But anyway, my own personal opinion is that once, the first call, she said to me, well, he's outside the house, right? I said, yes. Well, make sure your door's locked. I said, I did. And at that point, I think she completely forgot about it. That it was a non-issue anymore.
Let's deal with this specific incident, but also we'll talk about the protocols and possibly have the chief and town manager share with us the protocols, so that you as citizens, and not just yourselves, but all of us, are comfortable that there is appropriate response time. in order, because that does sound like a long period of time. But we can't really spend much more time on this discussion. I think we've got the marching order. So, Bob, I think we should go from there.
Well, I tried to kind of follow the chain of command. I tried to see the chief first. I got nowhere. I talked to the town manager. He was I understand how the system works. The chief's got to protect his people, the town manager's got to protect the chief. But who's going to protect the people?
Yeah.
An hour and 15 minutes to response to emergency call is not acceptable, and somebody needs to look into it. There's some problems that you need to identify the problems, and you need to solve the problems so that you don't have anybody back in here with the same experience I had.
Same or worse, yeah. Thank you, Bob, and appreciate that coming in. And we'll see what we can do in response, because we have the responsibility to the community, and we'll go from there.
If I may,
Please.
Mr. Chair.
Love you too.
The issues have been addressed. Initially, we were told, the dispatcher was told that the individual had left the premises. The dispatcher determined at that point that the emergency had subsided. When he returned and the second call came in, officers were dispatched. The individual was fine when the officers interviewed him. His parents were taking possession of him. Police don't have the authority to simply pick somebody up off the street and take them up to the hospital for a mental evaluation. We are no longer authorized to act in that manner.
Unless they're in danger to the person.
Unless they're in danger
yeah.
to themselves
Right.
or to other people.
Right.
And
So,
they determined,
yeah.
because he was
Yep.
calm and collected when they spoke with him, that was not the issue here. Yes, minimum staffing levels are 3 on a shift. And normally it's 5 or 6, depending on the shift you're on. The issue with the dispatcher and why information wasn't passed on has been addressed. So,
But, Stu, are you telling us, and the people in Bennington, that a dispatcher determined that there was no need for police presence?
in this particular case, that may be the case.
That is ridiculous.
That has been dealt with, Jim. I just said that.
Okay.
You heard me say
The
it.
fact of the matter is, this is not an agenda item. Maybe we should put it in as an agenda item in the future, because this matter's been called to our attention by a citizen. The town manager has responded, but if we feel that we need more information, we should do that in a calm, collected way. But we're not going to have a dialogue today.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to that?
No, that's just, we're not going to be into a give and take this evening. If there is a need, and we determine, or the board determines there is, it'll be done in an agenda fashion. But thank you. Don't think the matter is being swept away. We'll deal with it accordingly. We have Tim Payne, Elm Street.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Tim Payne. I live at 301 Elm Street here in Bennington. I have a request for 2 pieces of information. The first regarding the town property that is borders the back of my property, separates me from the Murphys. I want to thank the Highway Department for coming and removing a dead tree that was leaning over my property, but they've proceeded to clear lots more trees and lots more debris. And now that they're working in a zone that's probably 4 properties deep, going all the way to the turnaround, I forget the side street that eventually bumps into. I was just wondering if there's a place where we can go as neighbors to understand what the town's plan is for that piece of property. I have some concerns as it's been completely emptied as far as privacy for my neighbors, but also it invites folks to wander the premises. So if someone could be in touch with me, my number is on the calling list, that would be great. Hey, Tim, this is the plan, go and check it out. That would be helpful, we can give some feedback. The second piece of information that I'm requesting is I've lived at 301 Elm Street for more than 15 years, and in that time, I have witnessed myself probably 2 car accidents a year. to the point where people are physically removed from cars by the rescue squad. I've seen people get slammed into Elm Street Market. I've had several cars end up in my yard, which then litters plastic and glass all over my property. And I feel like I'm a good neighbor. I go out and sweep the sidewalk, but I depend on wrecking crews to come and sweep the street, which sometimes they do a good job, and sometimes they're not able to because it's raining, it's snowing, it's the middle of the evening. This has been raised as a concern. The town has taken incremental steps to address it. There are, the lines get painted every season, which we appreciate, but Dewey Street is extremely heavily traveled. The town does a great job of keeping it clear for the ambulances, and as a result, the lines disappear pretty quickly. We've installed flashing lights on the northbound, or southbound, Dewey Street, and the street going back down into Main Street. But it continues to be a problem. And honestly, from my observation, and since I'm the one sitting on the porch, I think it's worth something. It's mostly folks traveling from the direction of the hospital to Main Street. A lot of folks with Massachusetts and New York plates who probably are not familiar with the intersection. The flashing light is set off of the curb on the actual property of the owner across the street from Elm Street, so it may disappear into the Elm Street Market's lights for folks as they're coming down. But weirdly enough, the speed limit at that intersection is 35. It's 25 on Main Street, it's 25 on the top of Elm Street until you come out of Old Bennington and into the neighborhood. But it's 35 miles an hour, and that's fast. And so folks hit that intersection doing 35 miles an hour, and it's a matter of time until someone gets killed. And I'm not trying to be drama here, but Stu can speak to this. He's been involved in an accident at the intersection, not his fault, but he became a part of the infrastructure of Elm Street Market, and it continues to be a problem. Police officers come. Police officers are never there long because they get their ticket within a half an hour. People blow through it all day long. You live there long enough, you can tell when they're going to blow it. They're not downshifting, they're not hitting the brakes, the car's not deaccelerating. It's a problem. And my concern is that there are a number of young families who've now moved into the Elm Street section. So you got kids on bikes, you got kids walking around, and it's a matter of time until someone's walking across the street. And I won't even talk about the number of people who drive by with their phone out, not even looking. So here's a little message: don't text and drive, because if you kill somebody at that intersection, I'm going to be a character witness. I guarantee that. But it's an intersection that is very heavily trafficked. 5 o'clock rush hour. Morning rush hour, people coming from New York use Elm Street as a bypass. That's how they're getting around Main Street, okay? So that street is heavily traveled. Never mind the teenagers who start at my house, aim for Tom's house, hit the gas pedal, doing 50 at the bottom of the hill, and then they coast over the hill because they know that the police officer's waiting in Old Bennington to give them a ticket. So what I'm requesting for information is I would like to know, in the last 10 years, how many accidents have happened at that intersection? Because it's gotten to the point when people get in car accidents that rescue squad and police department officials are talking to people and saying, this is an intersection that has a lot of accidents. So if someone can point to me, hey, Tim, this is where you go, and it's public record, here's the number of car accidents, and this is going to be the number of accidents a police officer was called to, I imagine. That doesn't count all the ones that are just bumpers and people drive off and, oops, sorry, exchange numbers. But it would be really helpful, because I do intend to come back, present my evidence, and request something more as far as a way of slowing the speed down and drawing attention to the fact it's a four-way stop for an intersection. Okay. Like I said, my number's on the phone call list. You guys can follow up with me.
We've all had experiences right there at that intersection, some more closely than others. You sit there and act as a witness to it. We've talked about this with manager, and RJ has, I think, had to deal with it over the years as well. But I don't think there's any easy answer. And I've seen the cars blow through because they're hopefully not texting, but they're trying to get to the hospital. They don't realize that there is an intersection there. I had one.
Folks going to the hospital, Tom, respectfully slow down because they can't see around the corner of Elm Street. It's folks coming from the hospital, going in the direction of Main Street, picking up speed, and they're doing a full 35 and 40 as they go through that intersection.
Well, I'm not sure if lowering the speed limit is the answer because I'm going to continue to travel that, and I don't want to be part of that list of incidents. So I'm sure Stu can come up with that and maybe come up with another.
Well, the only solution that we really have been looking at is attempting to suspend a red flashing light in the center of the intersection, which would be a four-way flash, because it is a four-way stop. Whether or not, as Tim says, the flashing lights that are installed on the stop signs themselves are simply not visible when people are, their thoughts might be far away from where they should be. Yes, I was one of those folks that came through that intersection and was tailboned. The individual was having left the hospital with some very bad news, just wasn't focused. So those things do happen. And I don't know whether the flashing light would be the solution, but it appears to be the only next step is to try to direct that light to the middle of that intersection so everyone can see it.
What about the speed limit there, Stu?
We can look at that. I'm surprised it would be 35 miles an hour, but I'll take a look at that. That might be something that we can adjust downward. Whether or not it'll make a difference, as you say, is a good question. But as to the tree removal, what happened there is Tim did request some help with some dead trees there. When we got in there, adjoining neighbors said, oh, well, what about my dead and dying trees that are in this particular town-owned right-of-way? This was land that we acquired as a gift from George Hadwin. It was the last remnants of the Hadwin Woods and the property that is now Chester Knoll and Jennings Brook. It's now owned by the town. So ultimately, what RJ and his staff decided to do is go right up through to Harrison Avenue.
Okay.
It is a drainage way, so the Dewey Brook comes down through there.
I noticed that today.
We cleared, apparently, everything that we thought should be coming out of there so that we eliminate the hazards for the folks on the adjoining property. We have no plans to do anything other than that, Tim.
Okay.
It really is. We responded to neighbors' concerns, tried to do the right thing. And Tim's not the first one to ask as to were we going to be building something in there? No. It's a drainage way. It carries the Dewey Brook down through ultimately. So that's that, and we will take a look at the speed limit issue. I'll try to get that information on 10 years' worth of accident info. I don't think this intersection rises to the level of a dangerous intersection. I don't think it's been identified as one of those that the state identifies as dangerous intersections. So the accidents may not either be severe enough or as many as we think there are, but it is scary when you think the way is clear and suddenly there's a car in your side of your vehicle.
I live in the yellow house on the corner. Folks can come and see. I've had more than one car end up in my yard. So I'd be happy to have that discussion with any official that deems an unsafe intersection. Happy to have that conversation.
I'd also like to add, as a pedestrian crossing there, is you better watch out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, that flashing light was put in after I had a near miss with a large truck on that corner.
Thanks, Tim.
And, I mean, so what does it take to get a traffic light there? Is that impossible?
It's not impossible. It would require an engineering study to determine whether a four-way stoplight is necessary there. We've not taken that step. I would prefer that not every four-way intersection become a traffic light, because there's a whole host of issues that go along with that. But if there is a way that we can increase the visibility of the stop, the necessary stop, we're taking a look at that. And Tim has talked with me over the years quite a bit I think he even called after my accident to remind me that he talked to me before. So I am familiar with the intersection, perhaps more than some people are.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in, guys. We have Brooke Remington and Chris Mayer relative to the Mount Anthony High School parking situation.
Hi, folks. Brooke Remington. And
Hi, Brooke. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you. I live in Shasberry, but these are students at Mount Anthony High School, and I'm going to let them speak for themselves. So thanks
Okay.
for seeing that.
But pull up a chair anyway. Go ahead. Sure. Oh, yeah. We're pretty friendly to Shasberry people. Go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Chris Mayer. I'm a senior at the high school.
I'm Matthew Whitman. I'm a junior at the high school.
Great.
So we're here as representatives from the Student Senate, and we hear a various amount of issues that students may have, whether it be the food's not good or something as severe as the parking and safety on Park Street is not okay. And recently, we have had a number of students come up and talk to members of the Student Senate and teachers that people are driving too fast in the morning and during the afternoon, that there are a very wide array of issues. You want to?
Because I'm a junior, I have to park along the Park Street, and all sophomores and juniors have to. And many mornings when I get out of my car to cross, it's really hard to see sometimes because there's just so many cars parked along, and you can't really see the oncoming traffic. And a lot of them are going a lot faster than 25 miles an hour. And many mornings, some people are nice enough to stop and let me cross. And there's really especially during the winter, there's no place to walk along Park Street to get to the one crosswalk that there is. And it's right in front of the school, and many kids park on the way down the road to get into the CDC entrance as well. And sometimes when people stop, I'll get halfway through the road and someone comes flying down, and I'm stuck standing in the middle of the road on the yellow line just trying not to get hit. And I've seen many fellow students as well almost get hit. And personally, I don't believe that a large amount of the student body should fear their lives walking into school every morning.
As Matt said, there's only one crosswalk on that street leading up to the school, and it is in the middle of the circle to get it into the building. And so one of the things that Student Senate has been talking about would be what are ways we could potentially fix this. One way we came up with would be adding more sidewalks, because there's only one, or crosswalks. There's only one sidewalk, and that is on the school side of Park Street. So adding more from the opposite side to the the sidewalk. Another way we could do this would be adding cones to widen the parking area for students during those times, and then we can remove those when the normal hours for students to be out there is over, or to add lights. That way more people can slow down and stop and let kids cross. That way, like Matt said, kids aren't playing dodge car when they're walking into school.
Did you started out and you mentioned a sidewalk on the west side? Would that be an option?
That would be a good one. There's only one. Like I said, it's on the school side.
Right.
So most students, there's more parking on the other side. And if you're coming from the East Road or that side of town, you have to park going down the road. So all those students, not only are they on the side that doesn't have a sidewalk, but their doors are on the roadside. So they're getting out and having to worry about having their doors taken off by another car.
It sounds like there's a multitude of issues. Chad, you'll take care of it from here?
Yeah.
Are you going to speak in favor of doing something?
I can attest. Thank you guys for coming in, and I see it every morning myself. And luckily, my son gets to park he rides with me to school, so he doesn't have to deal with it. And I would be afraid of having my son park in the street.
Yeah.
It's definitely a problem that needs to be addressed. Increased visibility, more flashing signs. Definitely some good suggestions.
Stu, what would you suggest that we go from here?
Well, we'll come up with a number of alternatives, and we'll send them on to the folks at the Senate. Some of them won't be very popular. And I mean, we can take the extreme approach, was no parking on the west side of Park Street. We could ask Mount Anthony to construct a sidewalk and add additional crosswalks, since they are the ultimate owner of the problem. We could restrict the number of people who drive cars to school, and that would be a school issue. And I understand that is not in the best interest of perhaps the students who now go to school. Is there a possibility to create additional parking off-street on the Veterans Home property? And I don't know whether that's an issue that the high school could address with the Veterans Home, or is there an opportunity for the high school to actually create more parking on-site so that we can get those cars off the road? I agree, when I drive up through there, it's a scary proposition because there are so many cars parked along both sides of that street. It does narrow down the traffic lanes, and I agree with the young folks here. It's a problem, but I'm not sure that the solutions are as easy as simply adding more crosswalks. My personal experience is that people don't use crosswalks unless they happen to be right at them. And you can witness that anytime you drive along any of the streets where we have crosswalks. People jump out of their car and cross where they're parked. That's standard practice. So there are a number of options that we should discuss with you folks, perhaps, and let you weigh in so that you feel that you're involved in the process. And ultimately, we'll try to find a solution that makes it easier and safer, but I'm not sure it's going to be one that the students will enjoy.
Well, but
Go ahead.
I was just to say, just in terms of making it safe, it feels like we can, I mean, again, all of this has to do with speed as much as anything. Definitely having additional sidewalks would be helpful, having crosswalks would be helpful, but the biggest issue is that people are speeding in front of the school, and it's really hard to see. So again, I mean, it feels like maybe we need to more comprehensively just look at is it 35 by the hospital? You know, should it be slower in front of the high school?
It's a school zone. It's 25 miles an hour.
So, but maybe,
Yeah.
but in the same way that, I mean, we can reduce that speed if that makes sense. And maybe we do need speed, maybe we do need lights there
One
too.
effective technique I've seen is when one of Bennington PD's officers is parked at the Little League entrance. That definitely slows people down on their way. So if we could increase that activity alone just for safety would be helpful. I know the mobile cart that monitors speed has also helped. So just anything to increase the safety would be nice.
Okay. Appreciate that.
I just wanted to add one thing. One thing that I've seen in a number of other towns is right now, students can park on either side of the street. And I think that I've seen situations in front of schools where the parking is kind of like slanted and they can only park on one side of the street. So when they're getting out, they're not actually opening their doors into traffic. They're opening it to the next car. And I agree it wouldn't be popular because it would be less parking spots, but it might be safer and then people are not, getting out.
Sounds like we've got a lot of options tonight, and, let's look at these and put them in the pot together. I think law enforcement has a lot to do with that. Could you report back to the Senate that the voices were heard and well articulated, and we will address these concerns, and I think probably the town manager's office will get back to you with either a time to meet or to have further discussion, because I think the school, SVSU, has some interest, involvement in getting this brought to the fore as well. So maybe the next time the board and the SVSU meet, we can have some discussion along those lines.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks very much. Okay, believe it or not, we are finished with citizens' comments. Now we're going to go to the playground equipment presentation.
No. Southern Vermont College.
Why? Oh, I'm sorry. I've got to look at my updated, sorry, Mr. President. I'm sure you've enjoyed citizens' comment, but we welcome you to the presentation and discussion relative to SVC. And I knew my colleagues wouldn't let me get too far down the road.
I'd actually significantly rather talk about playground equipment.
I'm sure. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm David Evans. I'm the president of Southern Vermont College, and several of you have asked me to come today to give you an update and address questions. I'd much rather answer questions than just give you a straight update, but let me do a couple of things. One is, first of all, I'm very acutely aware of the economic concerns caused to the town by the closure of Southern Vermont College. Some of you know that I'm also the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and so I'm deeply involved in workforce development. Some of the other projects here in town, I've been involved in the Putnam Block project as well, so I understand the way all of these things fit together to try to revitalize Bennington and make it a stronger place economically. So I understand that concern. I also understand that everybody is deeply concerned, and rightly so, I think, about the future of the property. We have a very unusual property up on Monument Avenue, and it's got some unique qualities that make its future use an interesting challenge, and I share that concern, although I think that it's protected by several really important things. There's a historic preservation easement on the mansion, there's Vermont Land Trust on the forest behind the mansion, and the whole thing is Act 250 land as well, so I think that's very helpful. I also am aware that people are concerned about the Art Center. The Art Center, the Vermont Attorney General, as part of the agreement to have that donated to the college last year, insisted that it be maintained as a nonprofit community arts center, so that I'm going to assume that restriction sort of flows with the Art Center, so whatever future use it might have is going to have to encompass that use, so I think that's probably going to be okay as well. Right at the moment, my first priority and the first priority of the team up on the Hill is to secure good future opportunities for our students. That's going pretty well, I would say. I think there will be probably an article in the Banner tomorrow. Jim Therian was up there with a photographer this afternoon. We had about 40 colleges from around New England and as far away as Ohio visiting with our students about opportunities to transfer. Somewhere around 100 of our students have applied and been accepted to the MCLA, so that's good. That should be a pretty low impact change for them. The student body there is quite similar to ours, and it's, as you know, only about 15 miles away, so that's pretty helpful. The other thing that I think is really important is we are trying to find opportunities for our employees. I'm familiar from my work on the chamber and other places that good quality employees, administrative people, are not all that easy to find. I've hired a bunch of them as well, and I know that that's a challenge, and we have a lot of them. So I urge you, when you're hiring, to take a look at them. I'm a little more concerned about faculty because the faculty job market is different and much quirkier than the administrative job market. But you know, as I say, there will be a good number of well-prepared, good quality professionals available, so I hope you'll all look at them. Other than that, we're dealing with just a tremendous number of legal things, as I'm sure you can imagine. There's nonprofit law, and there's property, and there's mortgages, and there's employment law, and there's this and that and the other. So there are many, many moving parts, and we're trying to keep them all balanced to create an orderly process here for the next couple of months, and we'll just keep working on that. So I'm prepared to entertain any questions from the board or anybody else.
I'm sure we'll have a couple of observations, questions, and comments, Mr. President. You know, coincidentally, today I came across an article, just the perfect storm behind the recent college closings in New England, Boston.com. I'm sure it's not anything you're not familiar with. And one of the areas which they suggest is that this is like a perfect storm, but it's been developing for a number of years. And part of it is that we're just starting to enter the demographic cliff in New England. Where there are fewer high school graduates coming to fill the seats that Southern Vermont colleges and other colleges have. So I'm not looking for the answer. I'd love if there were. We probably wouldn't be having this discussion tonight. But is this what in part led to the situation that had to result in this decision?
Yes. The demographics in this entire region are pretty bad already and are going to get worse. And if you're tracing, I don't have the data at the top of my head, but I've looked at it often enough. The number of high school graduates in this area, and I see Jeannie Jenkins nodding. She knows this as well. The number of high school graduates in this area has gone down pretty precipitously in the last 10 years or so. And the other issues that are caught up in that are Vermont's pretty low college going rate or post-secondary rate. So we have that challenge as well. And then there are things like the Excelsior Scholarship Program over in New York that's problematic for us because we compete pretty directly with a lot of the state colleges just over the border, in Hudson Valley Community Colleges and some of the others. So that's a challenge. Then there's the issue of rising cost. We have restrained our increases in tuition quite vigorously over the last 4 years, but nevertheless, it's still pretty expensive to send students to college, and people are concerned about debt and employment postgraduate, and that's, I think, deterring some people from going on. Another thing that's related to that is we serve a very high proportion of needy students and a very high proportion of first-generation students, and that is an increasing challenge in an era of stagnant wages and in an era when the public questioning of the value of secondary education, especially college education, has become a lot more vigorous. So there are quite a number of factors involved that made a very small college like SVC that did not ever have a lot of resources and in terms of endowment vulnerable to the outcome that we're experiencing now.
Thank you. Other folks, would you like to start down here? Chad, do you have questions of the president?
I don't know if questions right now because I don't know answers. As a 2001 graduate of Southern Vermont College and being what I consider lifelong local, also graduating Mount Anthony, it's kind of like going through the grieving process. Very saddened, anger, frustration. And I'm not looking to point fingers, place blame, but I'm worried about the void, not just economically for our community, but several of my classmates that I know that contribute to this community and in the workforce, and not having those, bringing the college brought students here now. Yes. I'm worried about that void in our community and how we as a select board can work, and I want to be involved and help out as we can, but I guess I don't have any questions right now. Just know that we have to fill that void.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really important that's part of that void is that SVC has contributed considerably to the diversity of this community, and I think that's really critically important, and losing that is problematic. Speaking of changing demographics, that's the other side of changing demographics, which is the favorable side of changing demographics is the increasing diversity of the population, and SVC provided kind of a toehold for that here in Bennington, which I believe will be a sad loss.
I totally agree. Thank you for being here. I do think it's a huge loss, and I think the economics are not the only piece of it. I do think cultural diversity, I think bringing young people into this community from other communities, and that brings a lot of good things with it. I think it will take us a long time to understand exactly how huge the loss of SVC is to this community.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. And I haven't been here that long, but I love Bennington and have done my best to throw myself into the life of the town and use the small resources that I could command to help make things better here. And, that's a very tough thing, because I think that this is a fabulous place in a lot of ways and has a ton of potential. And I am chagrined, at the very least, that SVC will not be able to continue to contribute to that.
Thank you for coming.
David, thank you so much for being here, and I know it's been a really difficult time for you. I think we're sorry to put you on the spot here.
That's all right.
But it really helps the community to hear directly from you what's going on. We've been meeting a little bit, and I think that one of the pieces that might help everybody else is that, number one, for people who were not following this, it feels like it came on kind of suddenly.
Right.
Whereas for you, it's been a long, slow thing. So maybe if I could ask you to just go through that a little bit.
Sure.
And the second thing is that one of the things that we know from our discussions is that there's really been a changing landscape regarding NETCHI and accreditation and some of the things which are going to lead to a lot more college closings in New England, which make this so much more inevitable. So if you could address those two things, I think it would help people.
Yeah, let me start with the second question first. NETCHI, which is, for those of you who don't know, the New England Commission of Higher Education, which used to be NEASC, which was the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, they created some new standards in 2016, which didn't really change things all that much, but the language was pretty spacious in terms of measuring the financial viability of colleges and universities. And you're right, Donald, that in New England, and we've talked about demographics already, there are a lot of colleges in New England and a declining college-age population pretty much everywhere, except in the metropolitan areas, and even there it's not so great. And so I think one of the things that's happening with the accreditors is they're being pressured from the federal side because they are charged with protecting Title IV financial aid, which is everything, student loans, Pell Grants, all of it is under Title IV. And one of the things that especially happened under the Obama administration, and it's not totally clear what's happening under the current administration in the Department of Education, but the Obama administration became very much more aggressive in pressuring accreditors to watch that financial aid piece of their work. And another thing that's going on is pressure from the feds to federalize accreditation and just have the federal government take it over, which, trust me, would be a really, really bad thing for higher education in the United States. So the accreditors are being pressed from that side, and then most recently with some of the things that have happened over in Massachusetts, particularly the closing of Mount Ida College about a year ago, it would appear, although I don't think it was really true, that the accreditors were caught flat-footed by that. And there's a good deal of agitation in Massachusetts about the financial responsibility of small private colleges. And I think that NETCHI, the accreditor, who are based just outside of Boston, is very concerned that their role in policing the financial well-being of the colleges that they accredit is being usurped by state agencies. And so they've increased their level of aggressiveness, I think. So that I think is an important piece of context here. As for us, the college has never been strong financially. And when I came, we were still, really significantly challenged by the financial hit from the Beckwith embezzlement, which ended up, I think, net costing us somewhere between $700,000 and $1 million, even after we got the money back from his estate and from our insurance. And then also the issue with nursing accreditation. A lot of our enrollment has been driven by the nursing program, and nursing is a highly reputational discipline. And So when the accreditation problem hit, the damage to the reputation of the college and to the program lasted a lot longer than the real problems, because the nursing program's been in really pretty great shape since 2014 or 2015. It's fine academically and in all those kinds of ways, as evidenced by our recent agreement with SVHC, for example, about a year ago. But nevertheless, people are still saying, oh, well, the nursing program lost its accreditation. And when people talk that way, people look at the program, and when there are other options, they'll not choose SVC. So then another thing that is part of the history was that, I came in the middle of the year and there was a $1.56 million budget deficit, which we didn't really have the resources to cover in 2014, 2015. And, through a lot of very careful maneuvering and a great deal of generous financial support from donors over the last few years, we've been able to manage that. But NETCHI has wanted more proof that there's a sustainable financial plan, and we've made it work before, and we'll keep making it work. Isn't going to work for them anymore, and so between all of those things and our enrollment's leveled out over the last couple of years. It's leveled out, but it's leveled out at about 100 lower than it was. Well, it's more than 100 lower than it was, but it's 100 lower than a number that I think we could readily manage, is what I would say. And we kind of just ran out of runway. Very few reserve funds to speak of. Not a lot of room to maneuver financially to improve our student recruitment, some things like that just made it really not possible to carry on. And then finally, and I've gotten a lot of public criticism for this, but I stand by this decision. When we got the show cause letter from NETCHI, from the accreditor, we had sort of anticipated that it was possible that we'd be put on probation, and understood that and were prepared for that. But that letter, for the first time, explicitly raised the possibility that NETCHI would withdraw our accreditation. So the Board of Trustees and I and the other members of the cabinet got together and thought about this some, and thought about how to respond to that, and retained some legal advice. And they said, look, you can't keep recruiting students in the shadow of the possibility that your accreditation is withdrawn, because that creates the possibility, at least the perception, that you're committing fraud by trying to recruit students to an institution that you cannot guarantee will be an accredited institution. And I'm not really interested in committing fraud, and so we all decided, on the advice of the attorneys, and because we also thought ethically it was the right thing to do, that we needed to stop recruiting. And at that point, what that basically meant was we torpedoed our chances to increase enrollment for next year. And we ran some kind of regression analysis, and we came to the conclusion that in an absolute best case scenario, even if we were put on probation and started recruiting the minute after that happened, we'd have about 275 students next year versus the 365 we were budgeting on. And that 90 student difference is just about $2 million. And we were already facing, the need to raise about $1.5 million in philanthropic support, which is a challenge, but not impossible. But between the new hole and that philanthropic gap that we were going to need to fill, it just wasn't realistic to consider that we were going to be able to figure out a way to make it. So we've been fighting, and I think that without the NETCHI factor, and I'm not blaming them, I'm not in any way suggesting that they did the wrong thing. They have a duty to consumer protection and financial aid and all that sort of thing. But without that, I think we really could have figured it out, and we really could have reversed the trajectory of enrollment. We were way ahead on deposits and applications and everything when all this started to happen back in January. But with that factor, there was just no responsible way to keep going.
Thank you very much for that.
That's very helpful. If there's any solace and comfort in numbers, the experts, so-called, suggest that within the next 10 to 15 years, there'll be about 25% fewer colleges in New England.
I think that's right. I've read that too, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think you're going to see, well, you can look at Vermont, 3 this year, and there are 2 or 3 others that I know from secret knowledge are on the edge, which I will not name, but, I hang out with the other presidents and know what's going on there. It's a huge crisis, and it's going to hit this region hard. And the other thing to remember is, you talked about the baby bust. People virtually stopped having children in 2008, 2009, which means in 2026, 2027, there are going to be like no freshmen. And so the more access-oriented institutions like SVC are all going to have a terrible problem. So this is just the front end of that trend.
Thanks. Jim, what's the state going to do about it?
David, I think it's fair to say that we, not only as a town, but as a state, got caught flat-footed with respect to what you didn't do. You didn't come to the state, you didn't come to the town to let us know that you were in trouble. This didn't happen overnight. And we weren't even given an opportunity.
Well, on some level, I think that my budget is the same size as the town's. And so from a practical standpoint, I simply can't imagine that the town could have done anything.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry, David. You know what? Have you reached out to anybody in the Montpelier delegation? Anybody in the governor's office?
Yes, I've talked to
Peter Welch, Pat Leahy?
Yeah, I sat in Senator Leahy's office back in January and told him this situation. I sat in Peter Welch's office in D.C. and told him about this situation. I sent a long memo to every single member of our state delegation, as well as the
state delegation. When did you send that letter out?
It might have been before you were seated. But I sent to, I've met with Brian Campion multiple times, met with Dick Sears several times, spoken to the people from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
You did, because I sit on that committee.
Yeah.
Who did you speak with?
The secretary's name, I can't remember.
The secretary?
Agency.
The agency.
But whoever the boss is of Commerce and Community Development, I've spoken to. So I have alerted them. And
how long ago was this?
It's been over the past several months.
Okay, Jim, I don't think this is a productive discussion right now.
Maybe it isn't, Tom.
Maybe you should have it.
The one question that I want to know an answer to is, as far as the appeal process goes, when you knew it was coming from Netchie, why didn't you appeal it? Why didn't you take that opportunity?
Because I don't have the $6 or $8 million that I would need to succeed in that appeal.
No, that's not the information that I've gotten. Well, I didn't even come close to that.
Jim,
to appeal, just to file an appeal.
It costs $50,000 to file an appeal.
And you know that there was a GoFundMe that was so close to getting the money for that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're never getting out of order. I appreciate it, Jim, but the fact of the matter, we're not going to solve the college's financial situation.
Tom, just give me 1 second. The appeal would only work if there were money to demonstrate the ongoing financial viability of the college over the next 4 years. $50,000 would not do it. And I would need...
It would have bought you a little time.
I would need much more, like an absolute minimum of $5 million. And Jim, I know who you're listening to, and that person, frankly, does not know what they're talking about.
You don't know. No,
Yes, I do.
You don't know. No, you don't.
And the fact of the matter is, I need millions of dollars. And without millions of dollars, going through the process of an appeal would be a waste of resources that are better devoted to serving the students and helping them be successful at a different institution.
Spoken and heard.
Thank you. I've had the good fortune of hearing you speak to a couple of different committees now, David, and I think one thing you didn't mention in this portion so far is your willingness to kind of communicate with people openly on this subject. And you mentioned that, kind of social media and a few different means may spin stories out of control that have no fact coming from you. And so maybe you just want to remind folks if they need to speak to you or want to communicate with the college.
I'm available. And the other thing is, remember, I have fiduciary and other legal responsibilities that other people commenting publicly on this situation do not have, and therefore am responsible in ways that other people are not, which limits the things that I can say.
Thank you very much, David. I think unless Jean has a question, I didn't mean to cut you off, and I apologize for that.
It's okay.
I've been known to do that.
Thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
I know this is not easy, and I really wish you weren't here.
Me too.
Yeah. I don't know you incredibly well, but I know you well enough to know that if there was any way that this could have turned out differently, you would have worked night and day to make that happen. So I just
Still am.
What?
Still am. If there's something that's a reasonable possibility, I will follow it up.
Right. So I trust absolutely positively that you have done and your board has done the very best you possibly could have. And it's a huge loss. You know that. It felt like I was kicked in the stomach. And SVC will be missed tremendously. And I'm secretly hoping that you'll find a way to stay.
Who knows?
Who knows?
I'm considering working in the paint department at Home Depot. I have a good color sense. So, but no, I think it's been no secret to anybody in the time that I've been here that I think this is a really great place, and I've loved being here, and I've loved being here for all kinds of reasons, and believe me, I would not choose not to be here. To go back to Don and Tom's questions, I have known since I got here that the college had financial challenges, and I could very easily have gotten another job and left, and I chose not to because I really like it here, and I believe in the mission of the college. And that has been my guiding principle throughout this is, the college does important work. It does work serving students that a lot of institutions do not serve, and I think that's a really important thing. It's also one of the things that causes us problems because we serve students who don't come from a lot of money, but I think that's been really critical. And I could have doubled my salary going someplace else and didn't do it because I thought what we do here is important, and I thought that what Bennington has is good. And I certainly have made mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but I am not ashamed of the work that I have done for the college and with the college, and I am, not going to apologize for that. I will apologize for the fact that it wasn't enough, but I certainly have exerted a great deal of effort on behalf of the college. And to be clear, if you count the value of the Art Center in the total over the past 4 years, we've raised almost $12 million to support the college. So people who say we haven't raised any money to support the college are not telling the truth. It just isn't enough in the face of the demographic situation in this area. It just is not enough, and we just ran out of runway.
Thank you, David. We're with you. Thank you for coming in this evening and sharing where we're at. And
thanks, Tom.
keep us posted if there is anything that the board, town can do. We're here, and I'm sure you're here with your ears if somebody has an idea or suggestion.
Any grand ideas that are plausible, I'm all ears.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I apologize for getting out of order on the agenda. I had the old agenda, even though I have the two most current ones on my right and my left, that I'm surrounded by reminders, but I appreciate you guys. The next item, we're going to have a discussion presentation about the natural playground equipment. Catherine Byers and Kathleen O'Reilly, step right up.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Was there, so I had signed up for public comment.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Regarding SEC. I was wondering if.
Oh, sure, would you?
There's a chance to follow up on it.
Yes, you will. Please come in. I'm sorry, and I'm supposed to be the chair. Yep, good, thank you.
This is last night, cut him a break.
Yep, got me a break, exactly. I got Nixonian. Hi, thanks, I'm sorry we had you, I did see your name on that, and I appreciate it. Could just let us know who you are, and we'll have a chat.
Sure. First of all, I'm Zach Garafalo, proud Mountaineer, class of 2010. I now live in Albany, New York, but my family has lived in Bennington for over 100 years. My great-grandfather was the warden of the jail when it was at Penny Saver. So
you've got enough ties here.
Yes, exactly. And I love Bennington and I love SVC. And basically, this came out of nowhere. But in the interest of moving forward, and I realize that finding solutions at this point, might seem like a fantasy or a lost hope to some. However, there do remain people who are committed to identifying solutions. That GoFundMe account would have had a $25,000 match to then get to the 50, which would then have enabled the college to apply for accreditation. Again, that was only one step in the potential piece of the puzzle in saving the college. There is so much tremendous energy and tremendous resources that everybody, if it's pooled together, school and community, that could have been tapped into. And I guess my message today, as an alum, as part of the broader SVC and Bennington communities, is that, if there is any way, whether it's, and again, exploring those innovative solutions at this point. Obviously, it's one of those crazy, end of the clock, Hail Mary kind of passes. But my message is, I guess, we should not be putting the final nail in the coffin for SVC at this point. Obviously, there are realistic concerns regarding current students and where they may or may not be going. That stuff I totally get. However, there still remains, again, tremendous energy, to engage donors, potentially some sort of bailout, for lack of a better word. All of us with that vested interest in Bennington and with Southern Vermont College, I just hope that we are able to somehow prevail and come up with a viable and sustainable path forward. So that's all I really have, without getting into any other details, but I wanted to share that message on behalf of a bunch of alumni who have kind of, been rallied because of this unfortunate series of events.
Thank you, Zach. And, back in 2010, is that when you graduated?
Yeah, 2010.
Was there 100,000 students, or were they 100,000 students going to ASU on a, online basis as there are today, or?
You see, that's the innovative thinking that the college needs to pursue, look into alternatives. And again,
assuming that there is a rebirth, which, might be a fantasy at this point. But those are the sorts of things that I think the college and the community should pursue together to create a sustainable model.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, everybody.
Okay. Is it fair to move to the next item on the agenda?
I think so. Was there one person, was it just one person we put off? Yes.
Yeah. No, that's for the other part of the discussion. Catherine and Kathleen. And Shannon.
And Shannon. So we've had a little bit of change of plans. I'm Kat Briers, I work for BCRC. I feel like I see you guys a lot these days. We had invited, and today there was a site visit by Ron King, who works for the Natural Playground Company based out of Concord, New Hampshire. They came and did a site visit today to develop a site plan for the Stark Street nature playground proposal that's been in the works. The plan was that I was going to give a very brief overview of what the history of the project is so far, just so we all are on the same page, and he was going to do a 10-minute PowerPoint on nature playgrounds. He had to leave. He and his wife have early morning commitments tomorrow, and they live in Concord. They didn't realize this meeting was going to go on this long. So he has left the presentation with us.
I'll apologize for the board. Appreciate that. I'm sorry.
So,
if we know, we would have.
So we're setting up right now, but I'm happy to do what I can, which includes starting off with the presentation that I have to give on the history of the project. And Shannon is doing a very good last-minute job of setting up the projector. Shannon, IT specialist.
Very good.
Yeah. And I know that Ron of the Playground Company had planned to propose to dim the lights. I realize that might be difficult for people. No?
No, we can do that.
This is, you guys better be excited. This is a lot of fanfare for this. All right, so again, I'm Kat Briers. I work for the BCRC. This is similar to some recent presentations I've given you, which is that I believe normally the Community Development Director would be giving this presentation to you, but I'm kind of stepping in as Shannon, who's very quickly getting on board and becoming familiar with this project that's in the works. So maybe this is the last time that I'm catching you guys up on this. So the Stark Street Nature Playground, I'm just here to explain quickly, got kicked off at the end of, well, in the fall of 2017, a couple of community partners that involved the hospital, Catamount Connections, BATS, the Bennington Area Trail System, and several other partners, the Department of Health, and of course the town, came together and identified Stark Street as an underused public resource right in the downtown and started to propose some improvements to the park. If you guys are familiar, it used to have playground equipment, but it went out of safety codes and was removed. Nothing was replaced. So currently, what you see above is it's kind of an empty space. Mainly, I believe its function now is as an entry point into trails that are on the hospital property and that then connect into the Mount Anthony Trail Network. And over the course since fall of 2017, there's been this reimagining of this place to become a nature playground. And I'm going to walk you through the process of how we got there. So to locate the park in relation to downtown Bennington, it's about a 5-10 minute walk from the downtown. You can see where it is kind of to the left center of the screen. This image shows really well how the park in that place right in the middle of the map. It's, again, that 10-15 minutes to the left of the downtown intersection. And from there, the trail network begins, goes through the hospital property, and goes up through Mount Anthony. It's about 10 miles total of multi-use trails. So it's a great and strategic connector between the downtown, a lot of high-density residential neighborhoods, and of course our commercial center, and these outdoor recreational assets. So the group that I was saying, you can see a lot of the members down there at the bottom that started working together in the end of 2017. Started to propose some improvements for the site, which I believe some people are more familiar with now, like bats and the bike pump track. And early in 2018, we started holding some public meetings specifically directed towards the neighbors to kind of get their feedback on this, what is now a very, very quiet site, and how they would feel about some renewed energy going into it. And we got a lot of very clear feedback that some of the items that were being proposed would be too much, and we really had to scale down and really think about what the most appropriate use for the site is. It's at the end of a dead-end road. We don't want a lot more traffic. So we did this pop-up park with the support of some AARP funding. This was in June of 2018. Over 150 people attended over a 2-day period. And one of the best things that we got out of it, well, 2 things. We proved that people do like this park. They do walk and bike there rather than parking at the site. So that works. And we did a dot voting activity to get people's input on what exactly do you want at this site. And that's really led into what now is being proposed at the site. Here you can see what this dot voting activity looks like. Some high-level takeaways are that attendees of the event asked for public restrooms to be restored at the site, playground equipment, specifically nature playground equipment. The bike pump track was very popular, as was a proposed walking loop around the perimeter of the park, and access to the vast trail network. So from this input, we've really focused on these 5 core projects for the site. So that's the pump track, it's restoring restrooms, public restrooms, a nature playground, a walking loop, so it's accessible to a range of ages and abilities, and addressing some water issues that are at the site. So at this point, I'm going to jump out of this one, and I'm going to go on this journey with you, where we look at this presentation that I have not prepared. But I did listen to this afternoon. So Ron King and Ethan King, I believe that they're brothers, and they co-own this business out of Concord, New Hampshire. They've been working on natural playgrounds for over 20 years. There's not a ton of people that do this, but of the core group working on this project, they floated to the top in terms of who to work with on this, because their company is very explicit in meeting safety standards. Since this is going to be a public park, and we have to have insurance to cover that park, we needed to make sure that it meets all the same safety standards that conventional equipment does, and that's right at the top of what they do. Everything they design meets the standard playground accessibility and safety standards. So that's why we decided to work with them. This is this bit about the codes known as ASTM and CPSC. So if I can summarize what Ron shared with us earlier today, one thing that struck me a lot that I'm still learning about this as well is that there's actually a lot more accidents, it's projected on conventional playground equipment than on nature playground equipment. Nature playground equipment is built into the landscape, so we're going to show some pictures so that we get a good idea of it, but you're really changing the whole landscape, so you don't necessarily have raised structures in the way that you do with conventional playground equipment. And he said in his analysis of doing this for over 20 years, conventional playground equipment has over like $13 billion in injury claims and that kind of thing every year, and it's because it's so structured that kids have to do more risky play to have fun because they get bored. So what the philosophy of the nature playground is that you make environments that are dynamic, that kids don't get bored, and then they are calmer in the play that they do, and they haven't seen in over 20 years of this work injuries and that kind of stuff. They're also just nicer spaces. They're more like community parks. Again, here's this point that kids, frankly, find conventional playground equipment boring. Here he shared these images of what it looks like when kids are very bored at conventional playgrounds and the kinds of things that they do to try and have some more fun. And maybe that's why that $13 billion in injury costs come up. They don't really design for equipment. Equipment that you buy out of a catalog, conventional equipment, I'm understanding, is quite expensive. They have this more landscape approach. So I know he showed this image, and he said that when they do these presentations all over the country, they'll show this image as opposed to a conventional playground, and kids by and away say that they prefer these sites, that if they were to spend 2 hours with their family, they would have a good time at this site, whereas you show just a conventional playground, and 2 hours would feel a little bit longer. So imagining the difference between this and the previous, which is more appealing to both kids and adults. Kids are seeking all of these: complexity, intrigue, beauty, discovery. He did an exercise with us earlier. We were a smaller group about what kinds of things we did as kids. I think the takeaway to share with you is that the types of things that, me included, I'm young, but I remember playing out in the woods, that the things that I most enjoyed doing growing up to play, we now, when we design play environments, we don't design for those things. So here's some K through 4th graders and what they said they enjoyed. I was really surprised that being quiet was something that they've heard, that they look for quiet places above a lot of other things. They've done these exercises where they ask children they work with what they prefer. They'll show conventional playground equipment, then they'll show these images, and by far and away, this is what children say that they would prefer to be in, to play in. Here versus here, children say that they prefer this environment to play in. In getting at why children prefer these play areas more than conventional, here's some, again, nature, peace, things that, for this really reinforced for me the point that he made about children are less likely to engage in dangerous behavior because it's by its nature a more calm environment. And I'll skip ahead to what the actual product looks like that they come up with. Here's some great elements. He says, for whatever reason, kids in particular love boulders. You give them boulders. They climb all over them. Water elements, different designs. So here on the right is an example of something that they design. And as you can see, they build it into the landscape. And so I don't understand he understands all the intricacies of code compliance, safety code compliance. This structure can actually meet the same code compliance with, parameters like the requirement for mulch at the bottom, and yet it's a much more dynamic setting. labyrinths are something they designed for. There's lots of landscaping involved in the final design, a lot of use of trees and plant elements and landscape features. There's art encouraging just free artistic activities. They're good in the winter as well. Kids like to climb things. So this is I'm going through this very quickly, but these are just a range of examples of the kind of work that they do. Up at the top left, that's a design that they did in Bozeman, Montana, I believe. So then there's this question of accessibility and understanding how these codes work. If something's on the ground, it is by nature meets the definition of accessibility in a way that conventional playground equipment doesn't. So they do design everything to be accessible. The maintenance, he says, is there's some flexibility. You can put a lot of maintenance. You can do coating of these wood materials, mostly wood materials, or you can kind of just let them go and they become, more natural. So here's a couple of areas, as we said already, at Stark Street specifically, the traditional conventional playground equipment went out of compliance and was removed from the site, whereas because these don't follow exactly those same rules necessarily, he believes that they're not as likely to have those kind of compliance issues moving forward. So here's an example of what the final product looks like from them. So they really look at the site and do specifically, changing elevation and individual play elements that go into the site. This was important to show because he said that for everything that you see in this image, it cost, well, now I don't remember how much it cost, but it cost a certain amount of money. And he said if you were to spend that amount of money on conventional playground equipment, what you would get is that playground set that's up in the top right corner. And so for cost effectiveness of a site, he says that this, of course, he does this work, so he says that that's the way to go. But, you look at that entire area covered versus the small play element in the top right corner. And so again, they meet safety standards. I wish he were here in case you guys have a lot of questions about that. I can't answer them. He's very good at answering them, though. Again, in the 20-plus years that they've been installing these across the country, they've never heard of any injury claims that have come out of any of the places that they've installed. And yes, these are calmer and therefore safer environments for kids. There's some images of what the products look like, and that's it. I did it.
You did a great job for not being prepared for it. It was really a good tour. So I take it they came over today and sort of did like a walkthrough just to check out the lay of the land. Is that, Kate, how it happened? Or why don't you tell us why it was here today?
Yes, a bunch of us went to the site. I was there, Ron of the Natural Playground Company, two buildings and grounds staff, a representative of VLCT who does our insurance was there to ask specific questions about how this would be covered by our insurance and what concerns they might have. Also two representatives from Home Depot. Home Depot is pledging funds to support this. And Kathy O'Reilly of the Department of Health, because specifically the playground equipment is being supported by a $30,000 grant that the Department of Health got at the end of last year, and it has to be spent by the end of this year, so we're running with it.
Okay. So as far as the actual design, is that forthcoming?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So that was the point of the site. Was it today? It's for him to look at the landscape. We gave him the wish list. Come here. Yeah. Okay.
Excellent idea, Kate. Come on up, Shannon. The TV can't get you.
And thank you, Kat, for doing that last minute notice. So seeing the site visit today, it was great because Larry and Mark were there, and we also met with the state from VLCT with the insurance provider. So that was really important so that he could get an idea of what the site's going to look like. We looked at a to-scale map of another natural playground that Natural Playground Company had done. So they had an example. We also had the wish list that the steering committee for this project has developed. We have a couple of the members here from the health department. And so we were able to give that to Ron. He goes back, and then creates the plan that is to these codes, right, and safety codes. And then that is run by the representative from the insurer and Larry and Mark. So everybody is now together looking at the same thing.
I think one thing, just anticipating the neighbors, I'm sure they're going to want to see what it looks like before, we have a lot of comment on the part of the board or the neighbors. So really, at some point, draw them in into that dialogue rather than surprise them or the board later on if there are conflicts or concerns. So I would hope that would be done. What's the timeline for the plan?
Well, the grant money from the health department has to be used up by September. So the next step really is to get the plan, also then to meet with Home Depot provides not only funds, but they actually have a team that comes out. And the other piece that we're working with is a grant from the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which would help fund a landscape contractor to really be the supervisor of this, because I think you need a person who's done, so Natural Playgrounds doesn't do the installation. They do the design, you buy the equipment from them, but we have to find a contractor that can do the installation, and then so once that person's on board, we get all of our volunteers and our Home Depot crew and get to work, so.
That's great. Other questions, folks? I will start. Chad?
Might be a question for Stuart. I know we added for next fiscal buildings and ground position when this, assuming when this park opens, it'll be beautiful, and I'm anticipating it being beautiful, but will we have enough staff for this park and all the other parks that we've been adding on to keep up and making it still be beautiful 5-6 years from now?
Well, I think it really, in this particular case, it really comes down to how much maintenance is involved with the ultimate design of whatever is built there. We have some commitment from the Bennington area trail system to help with the maintenance and upkeep of the pump track. It really depends on the natural equipment that is chosen to put into this park. If it's relatively minimal maintenance, then we'll certainly have enough staff. But we don't have a design yet, so it's hard for me to speculate as to what that may or may not cost.
I'm excited. It's an underutilized area for this community for parks, and I think the neighbors, don't want to speak for them, but I know it's something that I look forward to.
Great.
Jeannie?
For whatever reason, that table's usually over there.
Guess what? The board is talking right now, and then I can't forget you at all.
Okay, so I had a couple questions. So, is the consultant working off a budget?
Jeannie, speak.
I'm sorry. Is the consultant working off of a budget?
Yes.
So, okay, and is that the 30,000 that?
Yes, that the funds for his piece, which is a small fraction of that, actually. And then the rest of it will be for the actual playground equipment.
Okay. And then, I don't know, maybe this is a question for Stu as well. I guess two questions. One, I know Willow Park is at the end of its, the play structure at Willow Park is at the end of its natural life. Is that something that we should be thinking about this year in terms of seeing sort of if natural play structures are the way to go, if that's a lower maintenance way? I don't want to see the Willow Park structure go away with no plan in place.
Yeah, the Willow Park will survive for a time. I share your idea to see how these particular facilities are installed Are they able to be insured? And if all of that is true and the maintenance is relatively minimal, I would probably look at Willow Park as another opportunity to develop this kind of a play area.
It's got a good hill.
It's got a great hill. Yeah.
That would be awesome.
I'm ready to go. People already slide there. It's amazing. So I think that, when we look at Willow Park, we looked at what it would cost to replace the existing facility, much as it is. We also looked at replacing it with the not very multicolored kind of plasticware, I consider it. And both of those costs are in the $100,000 range. So if there is an alternative that can actually beautify the park and still create a play area for people, then I think we would look at that seriously.
Okay, good. And then I was happy to hear that the bathrooms are going to go back in, because that feels like that will be useful both for trail users as well as park users.
Right. Yeah. Right, exactly. And this is going to be the land and water conservation funding, and then other funding that we're looking at, like from AARP, is over a 2-year process. So, that will come next year.
Is there any examination of any other way to get into the park, other than going in on the one street or, coming in on the trail?
Do you want to talk about that, or let the city planner take over?
Yeah, we're exploring a couple of different options. There's already, so the main way that folks currently access the park is by going up Stark Street. That's the main entrance. But there's also a back entrance through the hospital's property and through that trail. It's even separate from the trail network. There's really a partly paved entrance down from the hospital. There's 2 other potential entry points. One is a portion of the property sticks out on Dewey Street, and that may not be a viable entrance, but it's something that there is actually a part of the park that touches Dewey Street. So again, nobody knows what's possible there, but it's something to be explored. Another possibility is a right-of-way cutting over to Elm Street. That's very close to the entrance of the park on Stark Street. So there are a couple of other pieces, but it's all very early to know what the viability of those being developed are.
Okay, thank you. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
It is exciting. I think it's going to be very interesting and very fun to see what evolves there. Just to be clear, it feels to me like we have not voted on much with this. We have agreed in concept to this playground, right? Is that as far as we've gone as a board? And we haven't done any budgeting on it, so we haven't put any money aside for it at this point. Is that right?
That is correct.
So we would have to have a pretty specific conversation, I think, when we got to that point. Which it sounds like we're not there yet. I guess, do you have any sense of what kind of dollar figures coming down the pike for the?
Well, we did just receive the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant, which is a matching grant for up to $75,000. Is that right?
Yeah, and as part of landing on that budget amount for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is a federal fund, there's a total estimated cost of about $150,000 for all the improvements proposed at the park. So that's including, the pump track, which is already underway, and the nature playground. Because it's a 50-50 match, the Land and Water Conservation Fund over this 2-year period will match half of that, so up to around $75,000. So we've run through a couple of the options that we already have locally to meet our half of that $75,000. It includes the improvements at the restroom, which would be coming around for next year. Unfortunately, the $30,000 for the playground equipment doesn't qualify, but we've identified a lot of other avenues. Home Depot has really stepped up. They have a series of grants. A nice thing about the Land Water Conservation Fund matching fund is that they count in-kind and volunteer labor donations. And so there's a very complicated spreadsheet about how we're getting very close to that. There's an ARP grant that we've been recommended for, which is in the range of $10,000 to $20,000. BATS has done their own funding. The hospital has pledged funds to this as well.
Okay, so you'd
Probably
be
missing
coming to us
something.
for a relatively small ask, if anything? Yeah, okay.
Right, and really, it's
Mostly the
restrooms.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're going to stop at that.
Bathrooms,
My understanding.
So then the only second thing I would say, and I want to do it very quickly because I'm doing a terrible job of keeping Tom on schedule here tonight, and that is that, we've been working really hard with the town to do more and more RFPs, because in theory, when you do an RFP, you get the best price, you get the best service, and most importantly, you create an equitable situation where anybody can put in a proposal, no matter where they're from or who they are or anything about them. So I wonder if you did any kind of an RFP process for this natural playground piece.
We didn't because, well, and maybe looking back, that could have been something we considered. But as I said previously, we did even a national search of who does this work and who's really experts in it. And of all of the companies that we saw, which are only about a handful really that do this nationwide, this was the company that put code compliance first as a very explicit point. And so that was enough for us to say that those were the people that we wanted to go with.
And maybe I would just encourage you to triangulate that number with a second proposal or with some other proposal if it was possible to do that. I don't know. I'm not trying to tell you your business. Maybe it's too late for that. And if it is too late, then at the very least on the next round, it feels like that's the way we should be thinking about things, giving everybody an equitable shot at these things.
Thanks, Tom. Jim?
I wish you well.
That could be applied to, with installation, if we need local contractors on the landscaping side, we might look to pursue a variety of options versus maybe just going with one. So it might not be too late in the process, but it's great to know that it's, could be not a huge number to impact the budget. It doesn't sound like it's going to be no matter what you bring to us.
You're as cheap as I am.
Better budgeting job than us.
I just had two things. It seems, I've never seen one of these. It seems like it would not only be kid-friendly, it seems like they would be family-friendly. Like when my kids went to the playground, I sat on the bench and watched pretty much. But I can see I would be running around with them. Well, maybe not anymore, but I would have. And I'm just curious, is there a component of the construction of such a thing that the community could be involved in? Physically doing some of the work? Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could publicize work days and
Like
get the
planting or,
yeah.
Well, and that's very much part of our strategy to meet the required, the federal funds, is counting all of those volunteer hours. So just as there was with the pop-up park, we had a lot of volunteer outreach to pull that off as well. So we'll be following the same method.
Well, as far as that goes too, I think that these kinds of projects are much more successful when you can find some groups that sort of take ownership of them. So I'm reaching out to the parent group at Monument Elementary, to the Learning Tree, the daycare at the hospital, because they can walk to that very easily, and also to Catamount Connections has been really involved. So those are three different community groups that could be a big player in that.
The chair will recognize Narina Gilardi, who's on the list. Narina? Good evening.
Good evening. I've lived at Stark Street, right across the street from the park, for 51 years. So I've heard a couple things this evening that I didn't know about, so they're kind of alarming. But the neighbors, a few of the people couldn't come. So one of the basic concerns we have, in the paper it said there was going to be a bio retention basin. We looked all that up, and naturally we didn't sit idle. We want to know where you plan to put that. One of our biggest concerns is we're inundated with water everywhere. And if you move any of those streams or make a basin or any of that, when I make my lasagna, I'm going to make it in a canoe.
Yes, yeah.
You have got to stop this making all the decisions for the neighborhood without including the neighbors. Because really and truly, you are not including us at all. And you are impacting our lives and our homes where we have lived, a half a century. I know you want the park. We want the park. We even said we wanted equipment for the children. That was one of our things. But when you look at what's up there, you're talking about a postage stamp playground, a family playground, not a great big thing. So we need to see the real thing. What really are you going to put there? In fairness to us.
I think you're exactly right. Yeah, I think this process, like all of these efforts, has to be transparent so that all of the neighbors get their say, or at least get an idea of what's there. And I expect that's our charge from the board to the folks that are here tonight. But because, as Donald said, the board loves the concept. I think even the neighbors love the concept, but until we actually see it with the neighbors' involvement, I don't think this board is going to sign off on it.
When you go home tonight and look at your house, think what you would like right across the street or right next door to you. And I just heard another thing where the young lady mentioned there might be a right-of-way from Elm Street through to the playground. Well, here's my house, here's the right-of-way. And for years, I have been told nothing can go there because that's the water line to the hospital. So you can't make a road.
I think that's my recollection too, but I didn't really want to get into that.
Well, you do know that because, yeah. And so all of us feel sort of dumped on Stark Street. You know, when we came to talk to you about the pump park, it was a done deed. We were laughed right off the surface here. And all of us feel very, very bad about that. We also don't want anything that's going to raise our taxes. Believe me, we don't really have a lot of money for our town. You can't be throwing it around all over and then say, oh, well, you know, we owe this, and taxes are going to go up 4 cents here, 3 cents there. We have to do due diligence, and we have to think about the people who live there. It's always been a great little park. It still can be a great little park. But you're looking at a grandiose idea. Like, you know, where are you going to put these big mounds of dirt? Where's the water going to go?
Yeah, but I don't think we're anywhere near that. So I think you're going to be one of the first folks that's going to be on that checklist to be invited in.
You know,
I don't see this Disneyland park.
You should see the water that goes down Stark Street in a big rainstorm. You know, I mean, it's everywhere. Our lawns are wet. You know, I mean, it's, nobody's thinking about that. You know, so please include us in what you're thinking about so that we have a chance to say, whoa, wait a minute.
Well, I think, you know, rather than, whoa, wait a minute, it's like, oh, have you considered, how about this?
Right.
That's what we expect as a town for community
Let us be
involvement.
proactive to help look for a solution. I just don't want somebody to come and build something all over around my house where I don't have any say, because that's not fair.
I'm looking forward to the next chapter of the discussion, including yourself, Lorena, because I think I'll be sitting there with you. Yep.
Absolutely. And the neighbors, I don't know why, but they count on me to come to you to say, whoa, wait, this, and I will do that for them. Because we're close neighbors and we love each other and we want to make this park work. But holy camoles, give us a chance not to be flooded out.
Great. Thanks, Lorena.
Okay?
Thank you. One aspect, I would happily invite you to.
Hey,
You gotta get
Shannon,
there.
you gotta get to the mic. I've asked for a mic that you can move around for the last 6 years.
It's nice to meet you.
Here you are.
I'm Shannon, so I'm
Nice
the
to
new.
meet you, Shannon.
I'm the new community development director, and you need to come to whatever next meeting happens when we can look at the map.
Absolutely.
But we did go today, and when we were there, we all decided that the water whatever.
Retention basin.
Yes, that did not make sense because the water table's so high that anything that you dig is just gonna be a pond. So that's basically off the table. The original idea was to divert the water, and the only place that maybe that we could do that is where it pools at the bottom of the basketball court. You know, figure out a way to push it back towards the culvert right there. You know where the water collects.
Oh, right.
On the blacktop.
Okay, right.
But other than that, nobody's going to mess with the water.
Well,
because-
even, where are you going to divert that, though? Because if you divert it so that it
Right.
comes across,
No, it would have maybe down towards the culvert that already exists there, is what I was thinking. I haven't thought deeply about that. But
Could you maybe take this offline, not that we're
and I'm sorry that you're late and you have to be a little bit late, but you know, when you work for us taxpayers, sometimes you gotta work
Do it for the
overtime.
money.
Right? Good night. Thank you.
Good, thanks, Delina.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, moving to the next item, which we've got this agenda that somebody overloaded my last day. I just,
Well, hopefully this will be a short one.
I love the fact it says donation and not.
That's right. So just, I did present a memo to the board, but just for the public's edification, the One World Conservation Center has offered to donate the 96-acre Greenberg Reserve off of Route 7 South to the town.
Motion to accept.
Excuse me?
So moved.
And as you can tell from the map included in the memo, it fits in very nicely with the other properties that the town owns, as well as the agency of transportation right-of-way for the, I think now defunct southern leg. But it would allow for access from Route 7 all the way up through Route 9 on town property. So staff recommends accepting the donation. It doesn't reduce the taxes because it's already a tax-exempt property. And if the board felt it appropriate, we would ask for a motion to accept the donation so that we could formally accept that from One World Conservation Center and they could put in their dissolution plan.
Could I have a motion to accept?
You have it. They've,
Yeah, I just haven't, I want to get it officially.
okay.
I was official.
Second? Okay, discussion?
My only discussion is, just like to, I would like to vote for this. I am on the Vermont Land Trust, as you know, and they're conserved properties, and I don't think there's a conflict of interest there. Would the board agree? Okay, so then I'm ready to vote.
Could I had, you said discussion, I did have one question more than anything. The building that was their previous headquarters?
It does not include the building. It's just the acreage.
I didn't see it on the diagram you put out, but I
No, it's a very good question. The old Howard Johnson's across the street on Route 7 is not a part of this donation, and we wouldn't want it to be, frankly.
Make an
So-
offer.
I believe it's under contract to an individual, yes.
The only infrastructure is a small bird watching platform in the wetlands and a bridge that goes across.
I didn't see it in the
Georgia.
map that you put together, which was really helpful. I'm guessing I mean, is that something you've shared to the general public? I'm guessing it's...
Well, that was actually a map that we put together when we worked to get the Headwaters Park. So it was actually part of our vision that would all
That visual is
knit
helpful.
together. So it is helpful showing how it all fits together.
Dan. As far as the use of the land, is it restricted in any way? Are there any covenants that say we can't do this or that?
I'll let Mr. Campbell answer that.
So in the early 2000s, it was a Vermont Land Trust project, and we got state funding from the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board to help them buy that. And as a result of that, there's a conservation easement on the Greenberg Reserve, which prevents a lot of development. However, it would allow for an education center near the parking lot at the Greenberg Center, which was going to be where the New England Tropical Conservatory at that point was going to put their center. It was never built, and so that right remains in the conservation easement. But other than that, it can't be developed.
Well, funnily enough, I learned in Montpelier this week through the Institutions Committee that they're desperately looking for a place to build a prison that will have 130 jobs.
That would not be a permitted use.
Well, you could call it an education center, a re-education center.
Howard Johnson.
Are we going to vote?
Okay. Any further comments, discussion? Hearing none, signify your motion is to accept the gift. Signify by aye.
Aye.
That's 7 in favor and no opposition. Thank you. We look forward to having that in the town's quiver. It's that is, if you look at the network, it is an amazing part of our community now.
We should also acknowledge One World Conservation Center for years of good work that they did. They were a really good force in this community. Not all nonprofits make it. They didn't make it, but they left a good legacy in that they're moving this land into the park system, so we all get to enjoy it forever.
And let me be the first to say thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Liquor licenses, Stu.
Yes, I'll be circulating one new license. J.C.'s Tavern is being sold. The business is being sold. It will now be known as the Dutchman Tavern. That is a new license. So it requires at least 4 of your signatures on the approved portion in order for it to move forward. And I have 9 renewals of first class and second class liquor licenses that I will also circulate for your signatures. And just to jump ahead, Tom, I have no manager's report.
You don't. And you can be excused for not doing the agenda. I think you can blame that on Dan, right?
It is all Dan's
Yeah,
fault, yes, Tom.
Okay. Other business before we go to an executive session. Jean?
I just have one question. The Monument Avenue solar array, have we communicated with them that they do indeed need to come back once they've spoken
Yes.
to the neighbors? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that.
Yes, both the neighbor, representative of the neighbors and as well as the developer knows that in order to move forward, they need to come here.
Great, thank you.
No, I had one thing.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. With David Evans being here and hearing from a couple citizens, can you just remind us, with Southern Vermont College's closure, if there's anything we need to double check or recheck in relation to our water tower up there? We have an easement across. We own that land. Could you just share on that a little bit?
Yes, we have an easement that was deeded to us from Southern Vermont College for the land that the water tower sits on, as well as rights of way to maintain the water and sewer lines that serve the college and the adjoining properties. So
Right.
we're all set there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nothing this week.
Jed?
Nope.
I actually have something, and I'm sorry, I know it's a late meeting, but it's really important for me to say on behalf of this board that we have had an incredible 6 years working with Tom Jacobs, and we are so thankful for it. It is difficult for a person, well, guys sometimes have trouble expressing their affection and appreciation, and so poetry is not where we normally go, but if we can find some poetry about sports, sometimes we do. So I would like to read this, and maybe it could be from all of us here. It's with apologies to Ernest Lawrence Thayer, who wrote, of course, Casey at the Bat, and this poem is called Jacobs at the Bat.
Boy, strikes out at the end.
The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Select Board 7 that day. The score stood 10-1, Chittenden County holding sway. And then when Colvin packed it in and Krozik did the same, a pall-like silence fell upon the patrons of the game. A few gave in to feelings of despair, the rest, you see, clung to hope, which springs eternal in our community. They thought, if only Jacobs could but get a whack at that, we'd put up even money now with Thomas at the bat. Alas, the problems were quite big in 2013 that fall. The recession had us on our knees and kicked us in the teeth. So upon that stricken multitude, grim melancholy sat, for there seemed to be little chance of Jacobs getting to the bat. But Van Houten got through Shires, to the wonderment of all, and John, the lad from MAU, tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had lifted, we saw what had occurred. There was Jimmy Joe at second and Keene a hugging third. Then from 2,000 ballots and more, a rising cheer it grew. It rumbled down through Gage Street and over Main Street too. It pounded up the monument and recoiled upon the flats. For Jacobs, Attorney Jacobs, was advancing to the bat. There was ease in Jacobs' manner as he stepped into his place. The ease with which he took control put shock on Stu Hurd's face. And when he forsook biking and quiet evenings with his wife so fair, even social media admitted 'twas mighty Tom at bat as chair. 10,000 eyes were on him as he walked up to the plate. The Putnam block, the town garage, and more would be his fate. Then while Montpelier pitched spitballs at him and the feds were in a slump, defiance flashed in Jacob's eye, and business as usual was dumped. He had strikes and fouls, it's true, but far too few to count. From RBCs to PFOAs, his successes they did mount. When one got past, we saw his face grow stern and muscles strain, and we knew that Jacobs wouldn't let that ball go by again. The smile had stayed on Jacob's lips, though every night meeting was late. He kept a sense of neighborly humor while he danced around home plate. And when the pitchers loosed the ball, it's always some darn thing, the air was nearly shattered by the force of Jacob's swing. Oh, somewhere up near Lake Champlain, they might all think they're right. And in Montpelier, the players keep the purse strings awfully tight. Yet here we sit in Bennington with smiles upon our faces. Despite the odds and lousy calls, mighty Tom has cleared the bases. Thank you, Tom.
Well, actually, I had about 3 pages of comments to make tonight. And I really worked at it, too.
Let's hear them.
But I think the meeting tonight sort of demonstrates, why we sit here. We hear from all comers about all issues, bad, good, great, not so great. It's been a real pleasure. But I wish you guys well, because it's, you've got a lot of heavy lifting to do. Social media has not been a friend of the board, but I've also said, live by the sword, die by the sword, as that proverb goes. I think those that use social media as the sword are going to die by the sword. And it's important that if you want to be respected in this community, that you give of yourself. And there has been a time when folks shied away from volunteerism or board activity. But I think there's a change in the air. What I'm disappointed in is that I won't be there for that ribbon cutting in April, when the actual work starts in the Putnam Square project. I'm not going to be seeing the Ninja Trail open to its completeness. I'm not going to hear about the rec center and development and the senior center, but I have a feeling someone in the audience or two will keep your nose to the grindstone. But there are a lot of things that this board has got responsibility for. We've been really fortunate to have Stu and Dan in the town management be there for us. I hope that continues. I challenge you to complete the projects that we've started, to come up with new projects, to make this town an even better place to live for our families and our grandkids. So thanks very much for the honor. Move into executive session upon motion.
And Tom, if I may, you're welcome to take your sign with you.
Give it to Lee. I'll put this on my desk.
Motion to move into executive session on a contract matter?
Question from the audience.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Please. Oh,
I'm going to harass you one more time.
Yes, good.
Actually, I think we got an awful lot of things that just condemn to kids things. How many parks and splash pads and all that do we actually need? Do the kids need to be kept busy every minute of their life? We didn't have all that. We went out and played. I'm still alive. I'm not happy that they don't do nothing at all for the seniors, and that's not going to change. And you don't seem to be making any effort to do anything.
Yeah. I'm hoping that that proves to be disproved, because I have every confidence that within the next year, and I'm hoping that YMCA, the UCS, and our rec center come together so that we actually are giving the seniors an equal chance along with our youth. Because frankly, have you heard tonight, the demographics are there's going to be more seniors than youth around, and we've got to make sure that the seniors have an opportunity and a chance.
Why don't they do something? Can you actually say there's anything they do specifically for seniors?
You know,
We may not be here next year.
yeah, I'm hoping we're
So
here.
what good is it to wait?
Let's see what
I
happens.
just think it's just idle talk, because I've been coming here a long time. And I've said a lot of things that I had to say. But I think the way the seniors are treated is awful. Because if you sit and think about it, what is there for the seniors to do? We can go to the senior center and talk, and nothing else is specifically for us. I could say more, but I don't want to get myself in trouble.
Well, I think your charge is to the select board of this community to make sure that there are opportunities for the seniors, for we seniors, yeah.
Stark Street, we have a senior walking path
Yep.
instead of more stuff for kids. It's a postage-sized, small place. We are seniors mostly on that street. And we're losing our privacy, our peace and quiet, our safety, and our properties are getting water soaked. And it's not right. It's like we're good enough to pay our taxes and to take our money, but nothing for the seniors.
You know, it's so wonderful.
Our house to go to sleep, because that's what
We
we
can't
think.
now because
Reel 'em in.
Wells,
Reel
can
'em
I
in,
just
Chair.
say, I mean,
Mr.
that's
Chair?
really wonderful, that is really
Go ahead.
wonderful that you're making a suggestion. And I think that would be I would really appreciate you coming and saying, here's something we would like to see come
been
to the
done.
senior center or see in the community. So we can take that offline.
They just give you a story, and it isn't going to happen.
Well, let's take it, let's have that, let's continue to have that
It's
conversation.
just talk, and that's all it amounts to.
Let's continue to have
Can
this
you
conversation.
seriously tell me how much things there is here for the seniors to do? We don't even have a boss.
Well, you know, and not that I want to end this wonderful discussion, but you can have it offline, and I'd like to see if there are results for this discussion.
Okay.
Thank you. We're going to executive session.
Thank you.
Thanks.